What's going on, everybody? This is live stream 38, and recruiting numbers are down across the United States military. So tonight's live stream is going to be dedicated to discussing just that. Why? Why are recruiting numbers down? And I would go as far as to say probably, and I haven't looked into this, but I'm going to assume probably retention and reenlistments are probably down across the forces as well. So I've got a pretty interesting panel here. I got some new faces. Well, one new face. And we'll just go around and let me introduce everybody. So this is Jeff. Jeff's a good buddy of mine. I'm going to kind of keep his identity a little bit of a secret, but he has kind of an inside job where he speaks to veterans on a daily basis. And so he can kind of give us perspective, on particularly on why guys are getting out of the U.S. military. And I'm sure that translates a lot of in why people would not join the U.S. military. So Jeff and I served together, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. So welcome on tonight, Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Hey, thanks, buddy. My name's Jeff. I am a military retiree. I'm also a veteran service officer, and I work for a national nonprofit to where I handle on any given day between 150 to 300 clients that are either separating active guard or reserves or military spouses. So I talk to a lot of people on an average daily basis. So I'm going to give you some perspective here in a little bit. So I'll leave it at that. Talk.
All right. Thanks, brother. Next, we got Bruce at Camp Armit. Good buddy of mine. He's essentially my right-hand man in every YouTube video. So Bruce is our civilian perspective tonight. He has a background as a armorer and a former aircraft mechanic, and always brings a great point of view. Thanks for coming on tonight, Bruce.
You bet, guys. I've just missed these last few streams over the last month or so. I'm not Brent's guest speaker, although you guys may not recognize me. I am extremely tan right now because I've been on the beach for the last 3 weeks. I'm sure you guys barely recognize me, but hey, it's me in the flesh. I'm back.
All right. Next, we got the good doc, Dr. Christopher Larson. He was a veteran in the United States Army, served in the early 80s in Korea, hooking and jabbing with the North Koreans from time to time. He was an NCO. He's since got out, got his doctorate. He's written many books on small unit tactics. He's the original founder of the One Shepherd Leadership Institute, going 40 years strong. And Doc just always brings an excellent, educated perspective to the chat. Doc, thanks for jumping on tonight.
No, thanks for having me. And I'm educated, huh? Does that make me the good guy tonight or the bad guy tonight? I might have to be the bad guy. We'll see.
All right, last member on our panel tonight is Les with Pegasus Test. That is his YouTube channel. Be sure to check that out. Les is a Marine. He served in the early 90s. He's a veteran of the Gulf War. He has his own logistics company. He also has his own tactical training company called Polaris Training and Simulations Division. Les is actually in Finland right now. So hopefully our connection holds up really well for him. I know it's getting into the wee hours in the morning. So Les, thanks for making it on tonight, brother.
Glad to be here, Brent.
All right, guys, so that is our panel tonight. So, again, our topic of the hour is recruiting numbers are down, and why is that? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the horn. I'm going to start with our traditional starting pitcher, which is Les. So, going back to Les, and you kick it off, and we'll go around. Each guy will have about a minute or two to say his piece on why they think recruiting numbers are down. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is interesting because right now we are heading into economic hard times, depending on which source you want to believe. We are either about to enter a recession or we're already in one. Traditionally, when this type of situation happens, military recruiting goes through the roof because everybody wants that stable paycheck. They want those stable benefits, and they want just general stability in their life. Right now, the U.S. military is not overly committed to any big conflicts overseas. So if you join up, technically, you probably have a good chance of being stationed stateside, having a stable job, getting the job that you want to get. So right now, recruiting numbers should be through the roof, and they're not. And that's a really interesting puzzle. I don't think we've encountered this before. I will say, due to our age, Doc and I have seen a little bit of this in the 80s when the time we joined up, and the fact that we were coming out of the early 80s recession, the military was rebuilding, and recruitment was high. The military put a lot of effort in.
Oh, might have lost Les. Anybody else hear him?
It looks like I lost my connection there temporarily. So just finishing up there, I was just saying, this is in contrast. The situation now is compared to the early 80s when Doc and I were in, and coming out of that session where the military was actively recruiting and people were actively joining up, and it was considered a good career move for you.
Guess we've gone over to me. What's my opinion on this? I think I can bring an interesting perspective. Again, like Brent said, being on the civilian side, and I agree completely with Les. Everything he said's a point on, but I think he only touched on one small part of it, or at least pointed out that the economy used to be a reason that when the economy wasn't doing well, the military recruitment numbers were up, and that makes perfectly good sense. And that's not the situation now. I think there's many reasons, and I've been following chat this morning already. And I'm telling you that it's you guys, y'all are just, every one of you are putting out a different point, but you're all on point on that. And hopefully we'll get into those throughout the stream and break it down. But I'm telling you, I feel disappointed in the military. I mean, yes, there's a disappointment of Afghanistan. Good point. There's a wokeness going on that's out there. Good point. There's the current administration. There's sort of always been that. But the problem with the military, I think, partly is that the military has become too politicized. The military used to be there in our time of need. If something tragic and terrible happened, both sides, Democrat, Republican, right, left, whatever, could pretty much so come together and say, okay, we as a country, we're Americans. I'm thinking post 9/11. We came together, we went and kicked some ass. That feeling doesn't seem to be there anymore. And couple that with the fact that it's almost as if the military, or at least those that are in charge, they don't feel that way either. There's no sense of pride in that they're out there trying to encourage other Americans to join the military and to serve the country. That was going on, big time in the 1980s. You couldn't turn on the TV without there being like this cool, kick-ass commercial on TV for the Marines or for even the freaking Coast Guard, man. You're sitting there going, yeah, I'm going to go join the freaking Coast Guard, man. That's kick-ass. You don't have that anymore. Every now and then I see a billboard. I barely ever see any commercials. So I think there's a whole lot of reasons behind that. And, maybe we can delve into it a little bit farther throughout this stream. But, tell me why someone would want to join the military right now. Someone that's not already predisposed to do so, or already isn't familiar with what's going on, in our military. If you're just an average Joe, you're 18 years old out of high school looking for something to do, why would military be an option for you? I'm not sure.
All right. I'm going to venture out here with, I think what the other panelists have said so far, and I'm sure we'll come up with other reasons. I'm jotting them down here, that recruiting is down and retention is down. And I'm going to venture forth with one that we're not talking about, and it's harder to define. So I'm willing to be wrong on this. I'm willing to, hear it out, and maybe I'm going the wrong way, but hear me out. Recruiting and retention in the United States Armed Forces, particularly the Army and the Marines, are notably down. And they've been at suppressed numbers for the last several years. Okay. Christianity has been bleeding men for 25 years, just a little over. It's called the male exodus. And it's not all male. It's 70% male, 30% female have been leaving Christianity for 25 years at a rate of 25 million per year. You do the math on that. That's well past the 500 million. Now, Christianity is the largest single denomination of religious faiths in the world. It is. I think it's somewhere around, 3.2 or was 3.2 billion or something like this. I think even now it's down around 2.5 billion, but it lost 500 million in 25 years. Why do I mention that? Well, let's look at the other faiths, the five major faiths in this world. Christianity is down. How is Judaism, Buddhism, or Hinduism? They've stayed steady state, growing with population for 25 years. They have not gained, they have not lost. Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism. What about Islam? Islam has gained. Islam is, of the 5 major religions, the only religion to be gaining membership, gaining people to their ideology and to their faith. Christianity is walking away. And when there's some very telling trends in that, but when they're asked, here's what it comes down to. More Christians are admitting that while their faith is not necessarily shaken, their resonance, or rather the church's resonance with them, with their lives, has been shaken, that they no longer trust the church. And it's been racked by sex scandals. It's been racked by monetary scandals. And so you can make all those excuses, and you're right to do so, by the way. But that's not really getting down to faith. What they're saying is that Christianity for 25 years has attempted so desperately to become pop star status and to attract more and more and more people for whatever reason, because they want to spread the good word of, the gospel of Jesus, or whether they want to make more money. It doesn't matter, a combination of both or something else, but they've tried to accommodate more and more lifestyles, more and more people, and they've therefore had a bit of what we call scope creep in the military. That is, they're no longer on point, and their message isn't resonating with their own constituency, and the constituency is leaving in droves. And it's predominantly men who are leaving the Christian faith. By the way, half of those, because half of Christianity is Catholicism, I am a Catholic, half of those are Catholics. And they've got really good data on this and said, yep, 70% of them are men, and they aren't coming back. The women may come back, the men we know don't. That's the trend. Oh, by the way, where's the one growing denomination for Roman Catholics? What's the one growing denomination? And the answer is the Latin Mass. That's right. The harder it is, the more demanding it is, the stricter it is inside of Christianity, that grows. So the more exclusive it is, the more it says, no, 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 we want devout. That denomination grows. Is it any wonder that Islam saying, no, 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 we expect you to be devout, we expect you to be warriors, we expect strict adherence? It's growing. Islam is growing. Catholic Latin Mass and those orders are growing, but they are anomalies because the rest of Christianity is trying to be everything to everyone, and it's shrinking.
Agree with everything that everybody just said, totally 100%. But I'm going to throw it out there on left field. So I have a lot of friends that are still on active duty, and they are career recruiters. And what I'm being told is the number one reason why a lot of kids, men and women, are not joining the military is because they don't want to take the jab. Their parents are like, nope. If my kid joins, do they have to take a jab? Do they have to take the shot? And they're like, yep, you have to. And they're like, nope. Number two is, why do I need to? I mean, there's no sense of patriotism. I mean, like, when I was growing up, when I was, back in the early 80s, early 90s, I'm a military brat. All my brothers joined the military. I joined the military, and it was just like, I don't want to go to college. I'm joining the military. But a lot of kids nowadays, they're just like, it's not a big deal. I'm going to college, because they've been, I honestly believe they've been indoctrinized to where they think that the only way they can get a job or to be successful in life is go to college. Just because you have a degree does not mean that you're smart. It means you're educated, give or take. And I'm not trying to insult anybody who has a degree. I do. If you do, it is what it is. But it's also social services. Over the last couple of years, we have 3 million jobs that are not filled because people just do not want to work, and they don't have to. They're going to sit in the back of the thing, and they're like, oh, I'm going to wait for the next stimmy to come this way, and I'm going to hang out and do my thing. because the social services that the government has pushed down to those people to get them to vote a certain way. And I'm not going to say whatever it's like, hey, I can just sit here and chill and and not do a dang thing, and this is how the rest of my life is going to be, because this is exactly how I want to be. I get a check coming in from the government. I get free health care. I get my latte. I got my Chihuahua over here. I'm going to go over here to Starbucks, and I'm going to go to Panera Bread and hang out with the rest of the Karens. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's going on that people aren't wanting to talk about. But yeah, that's my take on it. Brent, you want to?
Yeah, I'm just getting here, so I don't know what's been said or anything like that. So, are we in introductions right now, or what?
Yeah, brother, your piece.
Okay. So I think there are a few reasons. First of all, we're not at war right now, at least not open war. We may be in a quasi-cold war with China, Iran, and Russia, but we aren't in the Middle East anymore, and this could be a factor. I think the reputation of the military, while unfair, may have been tarnished during the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Let me be clear, I'm not saying it was the fault of the armed forces. It wasn't. I'm simply implying that somebody may perceive it this way. It may have turned off some potential recruits who thought to themselves, I'm not going to go fight in a war, and then we just give up later on and leave. That being said, I think one of the major reasons for hindered recruitment is political polarization. The phrase "get woke, go broke" definitely applies here. So my portion of this discussion will be on the entrance of wokeism into the military as a primary cause for low recruitment numbers.
All right, so my 2 cents is I think it's kind of a culmination of maybe 3 different things. First and foremost, as Doc and Les already hinted on, we kind of saw this after the fall of Saigon. So after the Paris Peace Accords were signed in '73, U.S. forces, for the most part, pulled out of Vietnam and let South Vietnam fend for themselves, and then they were subsequently overran 2 years later. And then essentially we go into the late '70s with pretty much a demoralized military, and recruitment was down back then, and it had to be built back up. And obviously we have the great U.S. military that we have now because of that rebuild. But there's no question after the Vietnam War and the fall of Saigon that the U.S. military is at a very low point. Right now, I think we're seeing that kind of replay with the fall of Afghanistan. Pretty much the same thing. U.S. forces pull out, kind of let the Afghans fend for themselves, and then the enemy takes over. So you have a younger generation, in my opinion, are looking at it just like we saw after Vietnam. It's like, why would I join when that's going to be happening? I can go put my life and or limbs on the line, and then just to be sold out, and all my hard work and effort is just pushed aside. And why would I want to partake in that? So I think that's a possibility with some of the younger generation. It was already mentioned with the COVID vaccine. We saw that very politically polarized, and essentially because of that, you had a bunch of guys that were forced out, and that just became a very polarizing political issue. And I think that's hindering recruitment as well. Last thing I'm going to say is what Chad mentioned. We have some very weird stuff going on in the culture right now. And it's kind of ramrodding itself into the federal government and into the U.S. military. And for guys like myself and some of the other guys that have been around for a minute, man, I tell you, it's hard. It's hard to take some of these changes that are happening. So with that being said, guys, that's my intro. I'm going to open up the floor so we can discuss this.
Yeah, everybody has brought up incredibly good points tonight, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. In the aftermath of Vietnam, the military had to go into a rebuilding phase. I think in 1974, fully 1/4 of the defense budget went to payroll alone. In the 1970s, the U.S. military essentially missed a modernization cycle. And basically, if it wasn't the Navy building a nuclear power aircraft carrier, it didn't get done. We come into the 80s, and there was the great rebuilding where the U.S. Army especially focused on the air-land battle and Clausewitzian theory, and it went into a major recruitment campaign, most epitomally done by the Navy by sponsoring the Final Countdown and Top Gun, probably the two greatest recruiting commercials of the 1980s. But all the other services had their commercials too. The Army's, who I always mock, because I never understood how we do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day, was a great recruiting ad. Tell people you got to work hard for low pay. But they sat there and promoted that, hey, we have the Army College Fund. We have all these things that if you join the Army, there's an advantage for you to do this. The Marine Corps had something awesome. I know the ad that I watched as a kid said, watch the sword being forged and asked me if I had the metal to be Marines. That's what the ad said. What I heard is some guy going, I'm the biggest, baddest, meanest motherfucker in the valley. You want to be like me. And then, yeah, I also remember the one about telling about everything the Apache helicopter could do. And the guy was, I fix it and get $50,000 for college too.
Yeah, but I'm saying a whole lot of us, Be All You Can Be was their longest running, and there was no reason, just like the Marines never should ever get rid of a few the proud, the Army never should have and should immediately resort back to Be All You Can Be. That's the one that recruited me, because I wanted to be all I could be.
Exactly. So this cycle of rebuilding of the U.S. military, if we look back to our history from the moment we won the Revolutionary War, is a cycle we go through for many different reasons. Sometimes it's because wars are over. Sometimes it's due to economic hardship. It's going to be interesting to see how we build our way out of this. And the more interesting question by the retention problems that we're having is, will that core of NCOs and mid-level staff officers be there for when the rebuild starts? So the mid-level staff officers can rebuild the command structures, and will the NCOs be there to train the troops?
Okay, so let's talk about that real quick. So I got Marine buddies that are like, dude, we have guys that come in, men and women, or excuse me, men, that what we call a fruit bat. So, if you want to join, you have to take you come to a recruiting station, you do the pre-ASVAB, the East, and then we talk you through stuff and we make sure you're qualified, and then say, hey, dude, get your ass on a fucking pull-up bar. Can you do it? And they sit there and we call it a fruit bat. So they sit there and they hang and they can't even lift themselves up off the freaking pull-up bar. And they're like, seriously? I mean, you're 16 years old and you can't even do one pull-up, dude? Okay, well, can you do a couple of sit-ups? And they can't. And my friends are telling me, they're like, this is an epidemic. Like these kids, they would like to join the military. Some of them would, some of them don't. They just come in there because maybe their parents told them, like, hey, either A, go to college, join the Marine Corps, join the military. But they're like Joe Smuckatelli. They're like you should have been a blowjob. I mean, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you coming in here talking to us and just go someplace else? But I'll say this too as well, as a prior recruiter, something else that a lot of people don't think about is that college is a scam. There are so many, as a prior recruiter, every single year I fought and fought and fought because they would have these huge, they'd get all the kids into the auditorium and say, hey, guess what? You're a D student, but you need to go to college and we're going to find you a freaking scholarship. And I'm like, really? Seriously? That's where you're going to go with this? So you get a lot of kids that think that college is the only way that I can, that I can go and make a living. But when, now that here I am, fast forward, 30 years later, I talk to individuals and they're like, you know what, I just got to the Army. I'm an 88 Mike, which is a track wheel vehicle mechanic. And I got a job with Halliburton and I'm making $115,000 a year. No degree. But that's a conversation that a lot of Americans don't want to have. Certain kids need to go to school. Certain kids do not. They need to go to trade school. And I think that's why we need to bring back the trades back into the school to teach them something else. Because not every kid needs to go back to. Not every kid needs to go to needs to go to college. Okay. Also, when it comes down to recruiting, I've talked to a lot of people who said that they can't, that some of the kids that are coming in, they just can't get them to pass the basic, the screening test. They can't, they don't know the difference between your or their. I mean, really, seriously, like, yeah. And over the last couple of years, the recruiting commands from all the branches of services were so stringent that they said, hey, guess what? You have to be an alpha male, which I don't know if you know what alpha male is, but you have to make you have to be a 50% on the ASVAB or above, and you have to be, you have to have all these things, and we didn't want to talk to you. So you couldn't, if Joe Smuckatelli walked off the street and said, hey, look, I just graduated high school or got a GED and I got, a year of college, but I could barely pass the ASVAB and I want to join the Marine Corps would say, nope, go away. We want an alpha male that this is in high school. That's what we want. And
Okay.
I mean, so I think the military is kind of like, over the last couple of years, is kind of like hosing himself over, because they wanted, and they kind of like preyed on the fact that there was so many men and women that wanted that patriotism to serve, but then they wouldn't let them serve because you didn't meet that extreme criteria.
No,
And
it's
so,
not extreme. It's not extreme. It's what's been true forever. And I was going to quote 25%, but I just saw that one that's claiming 23%. Look, healthy young males, and that one said 17 to 24. The stuff I saw was 17 to 34. At least I think it was. I don't have it in front of me, but it doesn't matter. The point is, healthy. We're talking males between the age of enlistment age, which is enlistment age is 17 to 34. The military has for decades said only 1 in 4, 25%, 1 in 4 can qualify for moral, mental, and physical requirements to enlist in or get a commission in the United States Armed Forces. Hold on, Jeff. That's 25%, 1 in 4 of age males, right? Wait, but when that was parsed out and they said, okay, how many of those same males could qualify enough to go into and hopefully complete the training for combat arms, it was half that. Then when they said, okay, how many can go infantry, it was a third that. Now, you see it goes up and down. Every year they calculate this, and the article that Brent just shared said it was 29% at a previous year, this year 23%. But either way, we're hovering around 25%, give or take. Now, full stop. So that's been true. And the only time that those numbers aren't true is when we're under attack. When Pearl Harbor is bombed, we'll lower our standard, right? But right now, the problem is, one of the myriads of problems that we're looking at is the public school has lowered its standard. And it's actually got a term. I'm not making this up. Oh, well, Doc's just pulling stuff out of his ass because, he wants to make a point. No, it's called grade inflation. Grade inflation. Yep. So you can't get a C anymore. You can't. C's are not common. C's are punitive. You're not doing well enough, you get a C. C was in a bell curve, is supposed to be the high point. Most people were supposed to get a C. Okay, then some get D's and F, and some get A's and B's, right? And the C was supposed to be the high point. Right now, nominally a high B is the high point. So that gives us a leptokurtic skew inside of the statistical data. And what this means is public schools have had grade inflation. What was a C is now a B plus. What was a B is now an A. And what was an A now has to be, they got a 4.0 scale, and they're saying, well, I'm a 4.3 on quality points. What the hell does that mean? 4.0 is this. So the point is that that we've inflated the grades and the military hasn't. And so when we come and we say, okay, you got to let these guys in, they need a job. And the military says, well, I got mental, moral, and physical requirements, and you don't meet them. You don't meet them in usually in any of them, but mental and physical very commonly, right? So there you go. You're saying, oh man, we're not going to let them in. We're not going to let them in. Not everybody gets a trophy. Yeah. Well, hold on. Full stop, Jeff. In 2015, Congress said, no, the United States Armed Forces will all allow women into combat arms. We'll allow women into combat arms, and we will create an ageless, genderless physical standard that will not lower the standard. And yet, you know what happened earlier this year? Rand study, after 7 years of this nonsense, Rand study, and I don't think you get more legitimate than the Rand Corporation think tank. They did a study of all the data, and they came back earlier this year and said to Congress, look, you have one of two choices. You can either A, admit that this didn't work, it's broken, and that men and women do not perform the same. Or B, you can say, all right, men and women don't perform the same, and we embrace our new lower standard to include everyone.
Yes. So Doc, let me tell you about that one, man. So I have talked to recruiters that are active right now on active duty that are recruiting all throughout the U.S. So they're letting, we call a Cat 4. So a Cat 4 is somebody that makes lower than a 28 on the ASVAB. A 28. I mean, like, it's basically you walk in, you're like, hey, I'm gonna make the ASVAB, and you breathe and you blow on the freaking test and you pass it. And when I was on recruiting duty, I got one a year. There's recruiters that are out there for certain branches of the military that are getting 5 a month. They can barely pass the ASVAB. As long as they're mentally, as long as they're good, they could pass the PFT, they could do pull-ups, and then their background check is good. You're going to boot camp, bud. Goodbye. No joke. The military's hurting, man. There's a lot of people out there that are just like, not for me anymore. Where's the patriotism? And Doc, everything you're saying right now resonates. It hurts me to the soul what you're saying, because I 100% understand what you're saying, and I agree with it. It hurts me. I'm gonna pass it to somebody else.
Well, I just want to comment on a couple of things. One, you know that Brent's sharing a page when there's a giant Sportsman's Guide ad on the side. Gives him away every time. In terms of some of these points being made about, I know one of the guys in chat said that, you know, it's got to do with McDonald's. There's some truth to that, and we've talked about that before. It's super simplifying it, but we do have an obesity problem in this country, and one of the problems is it's easier to live in this country than it's ever been. That's been a goal of our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. We always want our kids to have it easier than we have, but the pendulum has swung so far. Even our homeless people throw food away. You know, you give them a guy on the street a box of donuts, and if you watch him, he'll throw that box of donuts away because he'd rather have cash for beer because he's got plenty of food. It's very difficult to starve to death in this country. There are places you can go and say, I'm starving to death, and there are programs where they will get you fat quickly. We talked about putting McDonald's in Africa and solving the world hunger problem, jokingly doing so. But the point being is that we have high calorie food that we've refined to the point now it's very, very difficult to starve to death. The side effect of that is, though, that it's also very, very easy to get fat and overweight like I am. And I struggle with it every time I go out and do any training. I'm like, man, I wish I could shed 40 pounds. It's an extra 40 pounds I could put in my ruck. Now I have to shave 40 pounds off. I'm struggling just to move my fat body around because I'm 40 pounds overweight. And guys, I'm going to tell you, you guys know this. Hey, I'm not the only one, and I'm not the worst one out there. I can only, and here's the other problem. The military doesn't get to control that. The military doesn't get to say, hey, country, get your act together, stop being obese, get in shape, work on your physical conditioning so you can join the military. The military just gets to take whoever shows up at the recruiter's door. And if those kids on average are 15% or 20% heavier than kids in the 1970s, or they're 30% heavier than kids that were joining after Pearl Harbor, well, you can lower the standards after Pearl Harbor and your standards are still higher physically than they are today. if those are the kids that they're having to take and recruit. So you have that physical problem. I know back in my day, we had a program called DEPS. I don't know if they still have it. Brent, you would know, but the delayed entry program for the Marine Corps. Basically, you would go up maybe a year before they sent you off to boot camp, and you would join up. And then once a month, we would go and train with our recruiter, and the recruiter would look at your physical conditioning, and you would do pull-ups, you would do push-ups, you would do runs, and he would pull the fat guy aside and he would say, hey, look, you got heart, kid, and I want you to make it as a Marine, but you've got to drop X amount of pounds. You've got to be able to do so many pull-ups. And it was that recruiter's responsibility to ensure that that kid got there. And that recruiter only saw that kid once a month. So he had to keep that kid motivated so that after the end of the year, he could ship him off to boot camp and check that box of, hey, I got Fatso into boot camp, and look at him. He made it. He's doing great. I don't know if that program still exists or how active it is, but there's got to be something like that so we can take people that have heart that maybe aren't in physically good shape, get them into the military and get them in a program, almost a remedial program, so that they can get in shape rather than not make it into boot camp or going to boot camp and wash out. Maybe that program exists, guys. I don't know. I'm not a military guy. On the psych or the mental side of it, the intelligence side of it, how does the military do that? The military can't take somebody for a year and make them smarter. They can't take somebody for a year and make them pass the ASVAB. I don't know that they would have that type of control. That's something that we depend on our schools for. I know some of you are like, oh, I'd never send my kid to a public school, blah, 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 blah. That's great, but the military can't depend on only recruits from non-public schools. Public schools are most of the schooling that's out there for our children, and we have to be able to recruit from those, and that's particularly true for any minority groups. So that's not really an answer that helps the military. That might be great for you as a father or a mother, but that doesn't help the problem with the military of ensuring that kids that come out with a high school education, regardless of where they went to school, can do well enough on the ASVAB to join and serve our country.
Okay,
All great points, Bruce. Although I think we should, for the purposes of debate, separate the physical facts from the mental facts. I mean, because the military can adjust. If they understand the fact that every kid walking through is 15 pounds overweight and he's going to require so much physical training before he can start boot camp, you can adjust programs for that. You can have a pre-boot camp. You can make boot camp longer. That's a separate issue. The fact that the kids are coming in dumber than a box of rocks, and that they're unmotivated and all that, and they don't have good morals, that's a completely separate thing. So yeah, the physical thing, that can be solved. I mean, all we have to do is put effort towards it. I'm not even saying money. We just have to put effort towards it. The mental, the pride, the patriotism, that's a completely different animal that has to be tackled.
So let me caveat on that too as well, is that the state that I was in when I did 2 tours of recruiting duty, the state that I was in, by law, if they received funding from the state and from the federal government for that school, they had to provide the recruiters for every branch of service a list of every single high school senior and their address, all their PII, their address, their phone number, and we had to call them. So I don't know where I'm going with this. It's not that the kids aren't out there. It's some of these schools, they've gotten more woke, and they I saw it when I was out there on recruiting duty, is that they didn't want us there. They wanted nothing to do with us. They could say, hey, hey, Joe Dickface, you could stand over here at lunch for 15 minutes and you can only talk to 5 kids. No joke. And I'm standing there in dress blues. I'm just like, really, right now? That's all I can do? Yep, that's all you can do. You can talk to 5 kids. And there would be the school the school officer that would stand there right beside me. I'm like, dude, really, dude? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, let's go with 5. And he had a little clicker. And he's like, you're done with 5. You got to go, man. And I could go there once a month on a Tuesday. Really? And that's all I could do. When the school had their ASVABs that were proctored by the U.S. military that wasn't done by us. It was done by a U.S. military proctor. I couldn't even show up and walk in and just say, hey, hey, you guys, dress blues are pretty freaking cool. They're sexy. This might get you laid. You know, I couldn't even do that. Um, I wasn't even allowed to be in the school. And then there was kids that took the ASVAB that opted out. They took the ASVAB just for the fact because they had to have it when they applied for college. And these schools are just like, nope, we want nothing to do with you. Go away. I'm like, we could have a whole conversation about recruiting and how high schools how they what they're doing to our kids, and the sheer fact that they don't like the military, and they want to force them into going to college. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Go to college, but it's not technical schools. It's going to college, and we want nothing to do with the military. I'll pass it to somebody else. This is a sore subject for me, man.
Go ahead, Chad.
All right. So, I agree with some of the things that are being said here. Yeah, obesity is an epidemic, sure. And it's true you can't fix stupid. There's a lot of jobs in the military that don't require high skills, but they teach you those skills. But I do think that there's a lot of health nuts out there, plenty of fitness obsessed people out there. I still think the woke thing is probably the biggest problem. It's turning away guys like us, natural war fighters, the aggressive type A personalities, patriotic, traditionally masculine. I mean, those people are under fire right now. So I've actually done some research into this, and I found some pretty disturbing things. And I think it begins with the service academies and the officer corps. Indoctrination into concepts like diversity, equity, and inclusion, which sounds good on paper. So I got an article pulled up from the DOD, and they're stressing the importance of this. This is actually from the DOD website. Not to mention, you got the Marine Corps opening up a position for a diversity, equity, inclusion advisor. Now, what does this mean? Diversity, equity, inclusion, it sounds great on paper, but you dissect these terms and what their meanings are, it's quite revealing. And to quote Dr. James Lindsay, a Marxist may use the same words as you, but they don't use the same dictionary. These words have different meanings. And now we have professors like at the service academies like Lynn Garcia, who openly defend teaching concepts like critical race theory, and the guise that it's a legitimate view of history, which it's not. You got a senior naval admiral, including Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be Anti-Racist, on his professional reading list. Now, Kendi's work actually calls for a dictatorship of the anti-racist. That's straight out of Marxist literature. He also calls for an unelected oligarchy to be appointed, and this group will literally have the power to veto anything in the government it deems to be racist. Okay, now we see how often the term racist is thrown around. I leave it to your imagination how that's going to be abused. This is what is infecting our military right now. I see this as the biggest problem, not only societally speaking, but in our military as well.
I think Chad's spot on. I think this is, look, we've already danced around this, and we're talking about so many different subjects, everything from parents to vaccinations to economics, to the to the public school systems and their failures, to an obesity and its failures. So I don't that there's just one issue here, but I have to say, when you ask me why is recruiting down right now at this point in time in the universe of the universe, then I'd have to say you have a United States military that is adopting Marxism. That is the Soviet and the Chinese to this day, and the Soviet previously, as well as Cuban, North Korean, and as well as many other communist militaries, had a communist officer all the way down to company level. A communist officer who made sure that everybody was indoctrinated. Now, you read some of the old books that came out in the 80s and 90s from Russian officers and Russian military, and they'll tell you just how much hated this person was. But nonetheless, they were there to, number one, indoctrinate the military into ideology, and number two, to rat people out. They were the snitch to big government and KGB and all this. We have that same thing. It's called the Diversity and Inclusion Officer. And they are diverse and inclusive only on a phenotype, literally skin deep. They care about hair color, eye color, skin color. They don't care about diversity of thought. In fact, actually they do. You're not allowed to have that. Diversity is only an outward expression of your phenotype, but you're not allowed to disagree with the indoctrination of diversity and inclusion. All right. The word political correctness, by the way, I have on pretty good authority. I don't speak Russian, so I don't know. But what I'm told is that political correctness is a direct translation from the Soviet term for political correctness, and it was leveraged by the communist officer in the military units. When he objected or she objected to something, they objected upon the political correctness of some phenomenon. And so this is what America is embracing, is Marxism. And so wokeism is absolutely Marxism incarnate. Okay. In fact, they don't even hide it. You know, I mean, when you look at Antifa, when you look at BLM, when you look at one ism after another, they absolutely advocate Marxist ideologies, Marxist methodologies. And this is the United States military embracing this. So, and it's embracing this for inclusiveness, right? It's embracing this for inclusiveness at the expense of the standard. So how I've been struggling. You guys know that I work with One Shepherd. We're in our 41st year. One Shepherd's a feeder group. We have a very tiny school and we have a very tiny community for the military, but we have a legacy with the military. And for the last 5 years, I have really struggled when people come to me and say, hey, I'm 16 years old. I'm going to finish your program in 2 years. Should I go into the Marine Corps? Hey, I'm 26 years old. I've finished up my master's. I've been thinking I want a challenge. Should I go into the Army and go for special forces? You know, they come to me and they ask these things. And I'm at a moral dilemma because I can't in good consciousness advocate for the military. And my cop-out, the solution that I came up with, which is very much a coping mechanism, was to say, all right, here's the thing. I don't know if the military is a good choice for you. I don't know that the military is good at all. I don't know that you're going to defend your nation or do anything morally, any moral good or any patriotic good. What I do know is that now more than ever, the United States Armed Forces needs you. It needs you because wokeism is rife. It is a malignant cause that is cancerous to recruiting, to retention, to training, to discipline and standards. I'm here with Chad. Yep is the single greatest sickness, not McDonald's fat bodies. We can overcome that. Wokeism, I think Chad is right on the money here.
Yeah,
Doc,
I want to expand on something you said, Doc. You're talking about political commissars, and I think you're absolutely correct. Bear with me, gentlemen. I want to read you guys something from Race Marxism. Dr. James Lindsay, who has done more research into wokeism than anybody I know. He is considered the leading expert. But bear with me. I just want to read you guys something real quick. The way it plays out can also be summarized neatly in the big picture. First, the field of action has to be operationalized, which is to say that some sympathizers have to be created or embedded within the institution. This is easily accomplished in the progressive spaces where such sympathies already exist organically, and can be easily amplified by doing the kind of writing that would get someone invited to do more in the first place. But it can also be done in other environments through, say, mandatory training in subjects like diversity, equity, inclusion, sensitivity, unconscious bias, and anti-racism. This activity has the primary goal of creating a sympathetic field of action where a mass line can later be run. That line will be run in the wake of a precipitating event, which will either occur eventually as a matter of course or be manufactured to the purpose exposing a contradiction in immediate need of synthetic resolution when it arises. So you are absolutely correct. That's what this is. These are political commissars, and they are in our military. They are in our government. Their job is to infect the mid-level bureaucracy where the politicians can't reach, civil service, they can't be fired, and all that stuff. This is going on right now. So again, gentlemen, to all the people out there watching, if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. This is the leading book on wokeism right here.
Chad, Doc, 100% got it. On track. So let me tell you about a couple of things real quick. So I, on a daily basis, for what I do for a living, I talk to, multiple veterans, transitioning service members, and their spouses. Okay. The amount of people that I've talked to over the last 2 years that said they're the reason that they're getting out of the military is because they're like, we love it. It's awesome, but it's too woke. Perfect example. I talked to a service member in the Army, and he said that he was a command sergeant major, been in for 32 years. And he said that we had a captain that came in and that was transitioning from male to female. And when that person got there in the Army Aviation Brigade, they had to stop training for 3 freaking days and to give everybody in the brigade, that's a battalion level, it's like 5,000 people, training on how to have inclusion, diversity, and how to deal with people with LGBTQ. Hey, America, I get it. You do what you want within the limits of the law, okay? And I don't care your skin type. I don't care. Don't fuck with my family, and you do what you want because that's what we have all fought for, and it's all we do. Do your thing. It's America. But they shut down an entire aviation brigade for 3 days to do training for one person that showed up that's transitioning. And the same brigade, he told me, that they put freaking a cat box, a human-sized cat box in the male head because one of the people, one of the soldiers, identified as a cat. I can't make this up. I mean, seriously. I mean, I mean, I've had clients that told me that 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 the U.S. military is now paying for people to get, their transition surgery. I mean, and I've also heard that there's recruiters that are out there, different branches of the military, are telling kids like, "Hey, check it out. You want to come in? You want to transition? We'll pay for it. Come on in." Fact.
And it's stuff like that that's turning off people like us. All of us here have served in the military, and we were I'm sure I'm speak for everybody here. We were all the go-getters. We were all the type A personalities, the motivators, the hard chargers, all that stuff. That was us, and people like us are turned off by this. And I think that's why you're not seeing the numbers that you're seeing.
True story too, as well, is that I've also heard there's infantry battalions out there that they've redone their TO&E. I don't know if you know what TO&E is, but it's their structure on the people that they have inside that unit, and they've got rid of the battalion chaplain. Goodbye, go away. We don't need you anymore. I mean, Doc. I mean, everything you're saying, dude. There are things that are going on that people understand that it's bigger than us, that is coming down, that the most Americans will never talk about because they don't have privy to it. It's not a big thing to them. It's the U.S. military. They're like, oh, well, people are going to join and blah blah blah. But there's things that are going on internally in the U.S. military that people are not talking about. It is what it is, and conversations need to be happening because it's going to affect us. Because you guys know as well as I do, the reason that we didn't get freaking invaded by Japan during World War II is because General Yamamoto said behind every bread glass is a freaking gun. And what's going to happen now? If something happens, I understand that there's no actually U.S. military force that has the expeditionary ability to get to America, other than Mexico, or they come over the southern border. But China and Russia, can they get to us? Yeah, they probably can't. They have one aircraft carrier, but we're going to fuck them up. Russia, I mean, when they come up from the Black Sea, we're still going to fuck them up. But still, as a sovereign, nation, we have to really rethink about what we're doing to our U.S. military. I mean, because I honestly believe that that the higher powers that be, they think the U.S. military is their petri dish, their social experiment. We can't give this to the average American person, but we can force this on the U.S. average military person because they have nowhere to go. They
Well,
have 4 years.
it has been the petri dish, and it's worked out very, very well. All right.
True.
Let me say that in the early 1950s, during the Korean War, we integrated racially for the first time ever. I mean, one would argue that we integrated, but not with blacks. Okay, we were integrated with Asians, and then Hispanics, and then finally with blacks. And it became a way that didn't go well. Just in case, just for the record, I think it was the 24th Infantry is what I think. It was pretty disastrously bad. They didn't have cohesion. Asses kicked in battle, and it took a minute. It took a minute, and it took a lot of bloodshed to fix that. But the fact is that by the end of the Korean War, we have racially integrated units, and this is years, a handful of years before the civil rights movement starts. In fact, it's not even accidental that the civil rights movement started in 1954, because all the veterans from 1950 to 53 came back and said, look, not only am I a black man serving in the armed forces, but I served right honorably and with distinction right beside my white brothers in arms, and my Hispanic and my Asian brothers in arms. And so, it is high time. We've served in the military forever. It's high time we desegregated this. So 50 to 53, those veterans come back. 54 to 64 is the 10 years of the civil rights movement. It ends very successfully. Thank God, finally. And so that goes on. This follows suit in 1973 with the addition of Volunteer Army, or VOLAR, which actually Volunteer Armed Forces. It starts in 73. You know what else starts in 73? The official end of the Women's Army Corps. And the women are fully integrated from 73 to 79. The Women's Army Corps closes its door in 1979. The senior NCOs and officers were allowed to retire from the Women's Army Corps, and then they just became the United States Army. Okay? That integration was far less successful. And we still haven't, as I just shared, even our PT standard here in 2022 has still not been set. When the Women Army Corps came over to the Army, and to Navy and to the Marines and everything else in the 70s, we didn't solve the problems. We didn't solve the problems of a double standard. And we still haven't solved that problem today. And that does wear away at morale of those integrated units. Now, when you look at militaries, you go, oh, but this military and that military. The Israelis have, integrated military. They sure do. So do the Soviets, and so do many others. I think the Chinese do too. Guess what? Female battalions, female companies, female regiments that specialize in certain things. And yeah, there might be a handful of males that serve somewhere attached to it, in some ancillary way, but they are female infantry battalions, or female medical battalions, or female aviation regiments. Guys, they're not integrated the way the United States military attempted to integrate them, and that hasn't worked out. It has created a double standard. It's created morale issues. It's created legal issues. We haven't done it yet. I'm not saying it can't be done. That's not my message here. And I'm not saying it's not the right thing. Okay? That's not my message either. I'm saying the system we used hasn't worked. It did work for racial integration because men are men and warriors are warriors. but it did not work when you had a double standard for females. Now, you throw in a furry, you throw in a transitioning person, you throw in someone with sexual dysphoria or species dysphoria. That means I don't know what gender I am. It changes from day to day. I don't know what species I am. I incline differently at different times. This, hear me out. This is an emotional disorder. It was diagnosed as emotional disorder during the Greek Golden Age, more than 3,000 years ago. More than 3,000 years ago. I know the problem today is that we all know, if you've paid any attention, that from around the 1930s all the way up to as late as the 1980s, homosexuality was redefined as a emotional disorder. And that was a bunch of garbage. But no one was calling homosexuality an emotional disorder in the 1850s in America or anywhere else. So the point was that this was an effort from 1920s to the 1970s to redefine what homosexuals are. And it was never an emotional disorder. That's garbage, okay? It's just an orientation. That's all it is. And no one gives a shit. Anyway, come on. If what you are sexually is what you wear on your sleeve, this is who I am, man, then you're a loser. But it's just a sexual orientation. That's all that is. But species dysphoria and sexual dysphoria is an honest to God emotional disorder. And the the military is pandering. It's pandering for recruit. It's pandering for, wokeism. It's pandering for virtue signaling. It's saying, well, we've used the military at no real consequence. I mean, there's consequences, but not like the nation fell when we integrated in the 1950s and when we integrated again in the 1970s. So why not integrate with people with mental disorders that need to be in a hospital somewhere?
Bingo, Doc.
Absolutely correct, Doc.
Bingo, 100%. And so why is he?
DSM-5, it's right there. Gender dysphoria.
So here's my question too: is why is the U.S. military paying for people to transition from point A to point B? Why are we paying for that? I mean, and don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything bad about it. I'm not trying to be, racial or homophobic or transphobic or anything like that. I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just saying, perfect question. Why are we paying for that? That is that is an elective surgery. It's an elective thing.
Well, on the most basic level, Jeff, it's the same way the Army started paying for college back in the 1980s. It's a way to get people. It's a simple, practical reason. I don't like it. I don't think we should do it. But then I'm not exactly 100% thrilled with the U.S. military paying for somebody's upward education either. But I realize that's a debate probably for another live stream.
Yeah, I do feel like I need like that 4-star general, that 5-star, somebody way up there to come in on the stream, because I'm sure they watch and explain to us like how are all of us and everyone in chat and people in the country, what's the big picture that we're missing? Sometimes, I have my bosses at work come and get me and they kind of grab me by the shoulder and shake me figuratively. Of course, HR come, but they say, hey, Bruce, like you're not seeing the big picture. This is the big picture. And I go, oh, okay. All you had to do was tell me that. Now I'm on board. I see why you're asking me to do what I'm doing. What's the big picture with the military? Doc, you talked about integration after World War II and moving into Korea. And yes, I think we can I could say this, that while we certainly can acknowledge there are differences between colors of men, let's just talk about men, that they're so minor, really, they're so minor. We're talking about skin color, small things that you can put those groups together and they continue to function as a good combat force. No problem there. Women, that's much more difficult. We've seen that with the challenges of physical strengths between the two. We've talked about this before. But then you start bringing in, and maybe it's wrong to even try to put them in the same category, but you brought it up. But then you start bringing in people with transitioning, for example, things things of that nature. That's a broad topic too. So I'm going to put it all in there. How do we, how do we do that? Where does it fall? Is it something closer to, well, we know it's not closer to putting different colors of men together. We know that it's got to be closer to integrating females, because here we are, it's female, male, it's somewhere in between. But what generals sat around at the table and when they have their little Sunday afternoon meeting and they say, what do we do to make our military better today, gentlemen? And they're smoking their cigars and they go, you know what, let's start offering surgeries to those that are transitioning into military, and let's bring all this into the military. Let's put it all together, and that'll somehow make the military stronger. I just don't see the big picture. I do certainly see that there are absolutely, we can all agree that there are great jobs in the military that women do phenomenally well. There are tons of jobs in the military now that men who are physically weak, I would go so far as to say handicap. If you're a dude and you're missing a leg, why can't you fly a drone as good as a dude with 2 legs? I'm sure you can. You could convince me of that. A person that's transitioning, as long as that's not creating a problem for them while they're in the military, again, you could do that job just fine. Why not? Why wouldn't you be able to do that job? I don't know. But bringing them into combat roles, putting them into trenches with men, I just think that's a bridge too far. I'm not convinced of it. It seems like really that nobody is. And it seems like there's just a ton of drama that comes with that involves the military. And I'm not sure that the drama is really even warranted. I almost get the feeling sometimes that we know there are people, and I'm not just talking about people that are transitioning, but I'm talking about all people that are drama queens. We all know a straight dude that's a drama queen, and he's always causing problems. And the employer always gives them a chance and then works on getting rid of them because they're like, look, dude, you're not helping the company. You're not moving the cause forward. And I'm sure the same is true in the military. But it almost seems like instead of getting rid of people that cause drama, regardless of what their background or their situation is, if they fall under a protected category, all of a sudden everyone in the military must embrace that drama rather than work to get rid of it.
I wanted to jump in here. So going back to Bruce's point, like talking about generals and who's coming up with this and who's agreeing to it. So I kind of feel like these in my opinion, negative changes have come about during my time in service. And the most vivid one that I can remember is, forced female integration into combat arms. And we've talked about this before, right? And I think this is why you have generals on the higher, echelons that are just, like, hey, let's do this, implement all of this with no pushback. Because the Marine Corps tried. The Marine Corps tried to say, no. They tried to say, no, we do not want female integration into our combat arms, specifically our infantry, because we know that is going to be detrimental to our combat effectiveness, which is the only thing that should be taken into consideration, right? And the Marine Corps spent all this money. And mind you, at the time, we're smallest branch of the armed forces. I'm assuming we, gave that to the Space Force, but we arguably have the least amount of funds in terms of the branches of the U.S. military. But still, the Marine Corps put on not one, but 2 full evaluations of all male, integrated male and female, and lastly, all female platoons conducting a big host of combat-oriented tasks. And guess what? No shocker, the all-male platoon outperformed by a long stretch. It wasn't even close. A far distant second, integrated, and then even farther, all female. And when the Marine Corps came with both studies, right, and said, hey, here's the results, it's not even close, we do not want to integrate, your higher, who was the Obama administration at the time, said, no, you will integrate. We don't give a shit about your studies. And after that, ever since then, all I've ever seen is, roger that, sir. Whatever you want to do, we're implementing it.
Yep, Brett, that was back That was back in freaking when I was still on active duty, man, and I was still at SOI, and we sent our instructors from Infantry Squad Leaders course and IOC in our Advanced Infantry Squad Leaders course out to friggin' IOC, and because they had a course, they had the first women that went out there, and I'm not saying anything bad about women. I'm not saying anything bad. They said that the first women that went out there and did the IOC, the infantry IOC is Infantry Officers Course. Okay, it's in Quantico, Virginia. They went out there, and all the women failed. They miserably, beyond miserably failed.
No.
They said,
Jeff, it's more than that. No, they did it repeatedly. They did it class after class after class. No female ever. No female ever. Not one. Not one ever passed IOC.
Yep. But we remember when they came back and they said, well, we're going to lower the standards.
Yeah.
And they still couldn't pass.
Yeah.
And the Marine Corps is like, oh, what the fuck? Yeah, what the fuck are we doing now?
What Brent is talking about, in the mid 1990s, the United States Marine Corps did this. And then they did it in the early 2000s, right? These are both studies. When Brent says they dropped a lot of money, they went to Ivy League universities here in the United States that said, look, we're going to be your non-involved, non-partial. We're going to tell you if your design is correct, if your data collection is flawed, if your data analysis is flawed. What they did is they vetted the entire process conducted by U.S. Navy Research, Marine Corps, right? And that's an actual thing here in D.C. Okay. They go and they do it in the mid-1990s, just as Brent described. It was an infantry focus, and the results are just as Brent described. They go back in 2010, they redid it, and it had the exact same results. What these two studies by the United States Marine Corps, what we're not recognizing is while the Marine Corps focused on the infantry in the early 2000s, the UK Defense Forces did the exact same thing with artillery. The exact same study, and found, and what the metrics they're looking at is speed and accuracy, a combination of speed and accuracy, because they said, hey, the ability to hit your target fast and hit your target accurately is combat relevant, no matter today, 10,000 years ago, and 10,000 years in the future. That's relevant to combat, kinetic combat. So the UK military did the same thing with the artillery with the same results. And not that long ago, I think right before the early 2010s, or maybe even simultaneously, I forget the years, the Israelis did it with their armor. They did it with their tank cavalry. And they found out the exact same results. Again, all male crews for tank gunnery and artillery gunnery by the UK, mixed gender crews, and all female crews. Speed and accuracy were greatly diminished with the introduction of females into those crews. So when they went in 2015 to the Armed Forces Senate Committee, the Armed Forces Senate Committee said, we see your data, we see the research, and we don't care about your science. We don't care that you have Ivy League backing you. We don't care about any of that because we believe your standards are too high. And we're going to change all of this, and we're not going to violate the standards. And this year, Rand said, liar.
Yeah, if I could make a point to something Brent said a little earlier, he was like, they presented the studies and the Obama said, you will do it. And the Marine Corps went, aye, aye, and they've done it ever since. Marine Corps has always done that. As I was coming off active duty and the commandant switched from General Gray to General Monday, one of the first things General Monday did was forbid corporals and below from getting married. Couldn't be done. He was eaten alive, and within 1 week, he had to rescind that order. So it's not so much a matter of, I'll comply without question. It's like, you don't get to not comply. That non-compliance is not an option. And I'm sure if the general had stood his ground, he would have been an ex-general at the end of the week.
All right, man. So let's talk about the results. Here's the results. I have to admit, I gathered these, I think, at the end of last year, so I doubt that they've changed anything. In 7 years, from 2015 through 2021, into 2021, what the United States Army thought was that they would have 6,000 active duty infantry females. 6,000. I think they gave themselves 5 years to do it. And at the end of 7 years, they had gone all the way up to 400. So 6,000 of the 55,000 serving 11 series infantry in the United States active duty. We're talking active duty, 55,000 infantry. Okay, I'm not talking other combat arms. I'm not talking about other MOSs, right? 55,000 infantry. The Army thought within something like so many years, 3 to 5 years, they would recruit and stand up 6,000 of them being female. That would be 11%. And that's in keeping with the Army. I think women serve at something like 14%. It was the last time I heard. I haven't looked up any recent numbers. But women overall in the Army are 14%. So they said, yeah, that's fairly close. That's in keeping. We'll get to 11%. They are right now, at the end of last year, at 400. Not 6,000 of 55,000 infantry. They are 400 of 55,000. Full stop. If you do your math real quick, you'll see that's far less than 1%. That's about 0.6 of 1%. Okay. But wait, there's more. Because once they analyze, okay, we only have 400 women in the infantry. What are they? Break it down for me. Half of them were officers. Half of them were officers. Now, I'm not here to disparage officers. That's not fair. That's not my point. But damn few of the officers go in where it's dirty, dangerous, and difficult. Most of them serve in staff and different role, and staff duties and stuff like this. They are not serving as platoon leaders and company commanders. All right, they're not trigger pullers. So half of the 400 are officers, female officers. The other 400 are female enlisted. And oh, by the way, when they went down to find who's actually in a line unit and not serving, let's say, on staff duty or some other kind of, duty that isn't with the line units, but let's say running a range control or liaisoning for one unit or another, right? In a nice cushy, I'm infantry, but I'm not with the infantry and I don't have to do day-to-day infantry stuff. When they said how many are actually in the line, we were told 60 enlisted women in all of the United States Army. 60 some odd. I think it was 64, 67, whatever it is. It was 60 out of 55,000. This is the success rate of this. So when you ask, Bruce, what's the big picture? If I'm going to be fair to the United States military, I'm going to tell you they're looking at the same thing that corporate America is. Hold on. Let me tell you why this could potentially work for corporate America. Because they said corporate America says, look, diversity, inclusion, all that. The best explanation I ever got from corporate America. And I mean, I went to this like 2-day event. And the guy came out and he's like, I want you to do it for social justice. I want you to do it because it's right. I want you to tell, all these wonderful things. He's like, forget it. Let's not do it. Let me explain to why you're going to do this. Here's why you're going to do it. Money. Because when you run an advertisement campaign and they gave all these different anecdotes. Now, anecdote isn't data. All right. But they gave anecdotes of how campaigns, advertising campaigns, went sideways because they didn't include segments of the market audience. And when they included this as a diverse group, they came up with much better solutions and made more money. And so if I'm going to be fair to government, I'm going to say, well, they're looking at this as a corporate problem. If I'm going to be unfair to government, I'm going to say, Bruce, a birth rate for any nation to be healthy must be 2.1 or higher. America's been well below that for 2 decades. We're currently at 1.7, and our data from this quarter, from the last 2 quarters, is dismally small. We don't know why, but it's nosediving across all developed nations. We're not going to even be around 1.7. If we hold this trend, we're probably going to be below 1.5 by the end of this year. Our birth rate is not sustainable to hold our economy, our government workers, or anything else. We haven't fixed the problem that we're not having enough children. And I think military planners are going, screw it. We need warm bodies. I just need somebody for the hamburger grind.
Well, I don't disagree with that theory, Doc. I kind of alluded to that in my previous comment, which was that there, on the one hand, I want everyone in the military, regardless of what their MOS or role ends up being, I want them to be able to take up a rifle, take up a bayonet, and go and fight. I had an uncle that, in some ways, sort of tried to avoid combat in World War II. And he ended up joining the Navy, and he went into a Navy recruiter, and they said, "What do you do, son?" And he's like, "Well, I cut hair." And they said, "Well, we need people that cut hair in the Navy, so we're going to put you on a ship and let you cut hair." Long story short, he ends up in the Philippines, and he's cutting hair on an air base, and a Marine unit comes by and grabs him up and says, "Get your rifle." And he ends up getting some combat experience with this Marine unit that really shocked him. He wasn't prepared for it. And I was fortunate enough when I was a younger man to spend some time with him, and he opened up to me about it. And he saw some really rough stuff over there and developed some opinions towards the Japanese that I probably can't share on social media without getting Brent's stream shut down. But when you see somebody that's developed something like that, it's moving. You don't forget it. And I've always remembered it. And I bring it up when I can, because I think that it's something that we should all remember. But the point being there is that the Marines went to him and went, you've got a rifle, you've got a bayonet, you are a combatant above all else. That was their mentality, and it was exactly the opposite of what he wanted to do. But he did grab that rifle, and he grabbed his boots, and off he went for a little while. That being said, I've always thought of our military as being that way. No matter who you are, in Vietnam, REMFs, right, rear echelon MFers, they may be snatched up and pressed into service if the base is hit. And who knows, maybe they were just driving a tug, moving an airplane around. That was what they thought they were going to be doing. But when the Viet Cong were in the wire, they had to grab that rifle. They couldn't just stand there by their tug, letting it idle while everybody else fought the war. And I think that when we get into really serious combat, I mean big wars, that's an important thing to have. But maybe the military is looking at it slightly different now. And maybe I'm just wrong in my old way of thinking. Maybe the military is saying, hey, look, we're going to bring people in that won't make good combatants. We know they won't make good combatants. We know that they're not physically fit enough for it, but we're going to lower the standards so we can get them anyway, and they can fly drones or cook meals or whatever it is that they need to do. But I will say this to those generals that are watching: beware of that theory, because my uncle thought that he was going to be that guy too. And those REMFs in Vietnam thought that they were going to be that guy too. And they were going to skate through the war and not have to pick up a rifle and not have to fight to protect that fire base or to go on attack and take out that Japanese bunker. It don't always work out like you want it to work out when the shit hits the fan.
Doc, I'll say this: you are my new best friend. Everything that you just said, Bruce too. Bruce, everything that ever been saying, all the things you guys have been saying here is freaking right on track. But it's Brent, I don't mean to go segue and go down to a different conspiracy theorist, but I'll say this: I totally agree. The birth rate in the U.S. is it's stupid crazy, and why? But at the same time, obviously, I'm assume, Doc, that
Hey,
you
Jeff,
have
real
read.
quick, since
I'm sorry.
you're so lovey-dovey with them, I decided to put you two next to each other.
Okay, cool. Doc, I'm pretty sure that you've read Rules for Radicals, correct? Karl Marx's Rules for Radicals.
Saul Alinsky wrote it, right?
Solinsky. I'm sorry. Yeah, my bad. My bad. Rules for Radicals. This is a whole different conversation that we could have a whole different podcast about.
Right.
About how
I've read excerpts, yes, but not the whole book. No.
And on how they're not secure in the southern border, and they don't want the U.S. people to have kids, and that's a whole different conversation. But I will say, everybody that's hearing my voice, this is the fact that we have the ability to do this and talk as Americans and not agree on everything. It's a beautiful thing. And this is why we do this. It's because Americans need to hear this. And these are conversations to where most people don't have, or they don't think about, or they don't want to have, because it's uncomfortable for them to talk about. Oh, whatever. But thank you for each one of you. All your comments have been freaking amazing. Brent, thank you for letting me come on here tonight. But keep doing what you're doing. Keep getting your word out there, and keep telling Americans what we need to do and what is the right path that we need to go down. And at the same time, I also believe that, just because it's not, you may not believe on their right path, but it's right in the middle, kind of some forth, some way, it could be that way, way forward. What's that going to be? I don't know. I don't know what the founding fathers had envisioned for us, 200 years ago. Is it right here, right now? I don't know. But the freedoms that we have, we need to protect them. We need to educate people. We need to stop indoctrinating our children, in schools, and we need to bring, faith back into school, faith back into into your home, and keep doing what we do as Americans. Get it out there, because there's a lot of people who want to hear this. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm really excited. This has been freaking an awesome, an awesome time. So I'll log off. I'm not gonna log off, but I'm gonna hang up and let you guys talk, because I want to hear, especially Chad. Chad, you got some stuff you want to talk about, man.
I will say, Bruce, I want to go back to something you said just a second ago. I think you hit on something bigger. I don't think our political leadership has their purpose of the military, or the way they perceive the military, is different from the way the other side sees it. They see it as a mechanism by which to spread the woke religion. And I think that's the ultimate goal. I'm sure we've all seen by now that disgusting video put out by the Navy about pronouns. I mean, it was all slapped all over the freaking media. Warfighters shouldn't be concerned with pronouns. They should be concerned with finding ways of, as General Patton put it, making the other poor dumb bastard die for his country. I think one of the most dangerous things Biden did was reverse the Trump policy of allowing transgender people to serve. We've talked about female serving, we've talked about, other races and serving, but, transgenderism is a mental illness, and they're trying to normalize it. Even the newest DSM, the TR is the newest DSM. You can tell they're using language in just gender dysphoria to try and lay a foundation to get rid of it as a diagnosis. They will use that. They now include the kind of the buzzwords that are being commonly used, like gender affirming care and stuff like that. That's now included in the DSM. So they're trying to normalize this, and before you know it, probably DSM 6, it's not even going to be in there. It wouldn't surprise me. But I just want to say, going back to what Bruce was talking about, war is hard enough for a person of normal sanity, and now you add someone with a mental affliction that comes with a high suicide rate, coupled with the need for constant medical care. You're asking for disaster.
No, that's an excellent point. Like, you have to look at your physical and mental state, right? Not just your moral state, your physical and mental. And so we made a bit about the physical. Well, what about that mental state? And what we know about gender and species dysphoria is that it is the end product of long bouts of depression, like acute depression, and not just a short little thing. Oh, I was depressed for a week or a month. No. This goes on and on and on over years. It's chronic depression, and it's one of the coping mechanisms with chronic depression is that, there's nothing wrong with me at all. I was meant to be a dolphin or a bird or a horse. And you think I'm joking? I'm not joking at all. I'm not making light of it, because I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And so there's a difference between me saying, you're not fit to serve. I recognize you as, one of the 75% that the armed forces has traditionally said, oh, you're not fit to serve. And so that's what I'm saying. I am not saying, however, you don't deserve the respect and to be, of a human, and then to be treated with dignity? No. The whole point of military service, like so many other callings in life, is to serve our nation and our communities. And those people do have every right to be here and every right to be treated with dignity. But that doesn't make them qualified to serve. That's what I'm saying is the difference. As well as many other afflictions, all right? Doesn't make them qualified to serve. And so, that's going down a bit of a rabbit hole, because this isn't about gender dysphoria. This isn't about species dysphoria. But it is about what are some of the problems. And what I see here is an overwhelming trend of, well, we have to be more inclusive. Now, that's partly because of Marxist ideology and indoctrination, sure. It's partly because, well, there are other pressures. We're not able to recruit the numbers that we need to recruit. So let's open this up, because we'll get 11% of women to serve in combat arms, because we are desperately hurting. When they talk about recruiting, they're talking about overall recruiting numbers, but combat arms are hurting worse, and their retention is worse. And why is that? Well, because they keep weakening the bonds. What all of those studies, the 2 Marine Corps studies, the British Army study, the Israeli Army study, you know what? To my knowledge, I've never heard of one earlier. It wasn't the Marine Corps or UK or Israel that started it. It was actually the United States Army. And it was specifically a qualitative study, not a quantitative. It was a qualitative study of a feminist who was getting her PhD, and she was tagged to go join the Q course for the United States Army Special Forces in the late 1980s. And she joined in. She went all the way through the Q course, which, God, I want to say is like, what is it? It's like 6 months is the standard. That's not the medical. There's a couple others that are longer, but it's like a 6-month thing. Anyway, so she goes all the way and drops out in the last 2 or 3. She washes out in the last 2 or 3 weeks of this like 6-month long Q course for qualification course for Special Forces, Green Berets, right? And she was some super athlete that was getting her doctorate. And she walks out, and she had been sent in and commissioned by, if I'm not mistaken, one of the senators who collaborated with the Armed Forces Senate Committee there in the late 1980s. She comes out, she does her study, she does her qualitative analysis, she codes all of her data, and she releases her findings. And her findings said this: women don't belong. This is a feminist getting her PhD and sent in by Congress, no less, into special things. She wasn't a soldier, and she got a prep course and got to enter the Q course. She comes out and she says, women do not belong in combat arms. They do not belong in combat arms because they erode the male bonds that are necessary for success. Now, mind you, her class that she did not wind up graduating with, after graduation, had bonded with her so tightly that they went and they awarded her, they took off their own scrolls and they awarded that honor, and they just said great things about her. And her report to Congress was, don't you dare do this. Don't you dare do this. It erodes the bonds, the male bonds that are unique to a male esprit de corps, male bonding, and effectiveness in battle, and that women have no business being here. That woman was pariahed. I think she did wind up getting her PhD. I don't remember, but she was pariahed by the political elite who had entrusted her as their baby into feminism. And she totally abandoned them. Absolutely abandoned them. And it gets down into things like what's called an economy of labor estimate. An economy of labor estimate, in the simplest term, is how to be lazy. And this is what has made us successful for at least 300,000 years and arguably well over 1 point some odd million years as a species. An economy of labor estimate, you know this, you do it, you just don't know that you do it. You walk into any given situation, you say, who expects the most of me? Who's going to be the hardest on me? Who expects the least of me? Who's going to let me float? Who's going to let me get by with shit? And you do this, right? And you do this whether you know it or not, because lazy people are smart people. They learn, hey, what's the least amount of expenditure, caloric expenditure I need to expend to eat? Okay? And that is what has made us such a thriving species. So this is a good, smart thing. And she said, a female's economy of labor estimate, when males are involved, is sexual. There's a sexual component to it. And this is what breaks the bonds, the male bonds in a combat arms unit. And this is why you must never integrate women into combat arms. That was released, I want to say, in 88 or 89. And all other studies flow from that seminal work.
You know, you bring up a good point, Doc. You know, for anybody that's ever been into an infantry platoon and has ever done anything, you know, in the infantry realm, I, you know, introducing something like that, you're playing with fire. I mean, you really are. And I mean, holy shit! If that was to have, you know, I can imagine back when I was on active duty, if you put, you know, a female into an infantry platoon, I mean, you got 30 Marines that are between 17 and the 25 years old, and regardless whether they're, you know, you're a Marine, you know, Semper Fidelis, things are going to happen, and it's nature, and I mean to the point to where like, okay, so we go out in the field, we're on the training op, and we have to we have to stop. Where are you going to piss? I mean, where are you going to take a shit at? I mean, seriously. I mean, these are things that we need to have a conversation with. I mean, and you can't tell me there's not going to be another Marine in that platoon that's going to like you and it's like, oh, I, you know, doing that. I mean, it's natural human reaction. I mean, it's. I'm not saying that females can't do it. I'm not here to say that. I'm not here to debate it. That is beyond my expertise and my knowledge. I'm just saying, as a grunt, it's not a good thing. You know, it's really not. I mean, and the people that are trying to push this down that way have never, you know, they've never spent, you know, 2 weeks out at freaking 29 Palms, California, you know, going through Camp Wilson and going through Range 400. They've never, you know, they've never gone to Iraq. They've never gone to Afghanistan. They don't know the inner workings of an infantry platoon. You know, it is what it is, and I mean, it's a great thing. But there are certain things you just cannot interject into that, and one of them is not a female. I hate to say it. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying that's not a good thing.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what you just said, Jeff. Just two really small points. So when I was in Afghanistan, my rifle platoon, at times we'd have a female EOD tech attached to us, and we'd go out on missions and stuff. And man, when we got back to the rear, what do you think my Marines who were in that age category that you were talking about, what do you think was on their minds? What do you think they were saying? All right. I'll let you guys use your own imagination. All right. In the middle of Afghanistan for, 6-7 months. And the only female Marine around is definitely on some of those Marines' minds. Okay. More than one. Another small consideration, go to the field. We're talking about an infantry unit here, right? We've already established that women can do phenomenal jobs at other MOSs. But specifically infantry. Go to the field, and there's like 3 porta-shitters for 100 plus Marines in this infantry rifle company. Guess what? One of those porta-shitters is now exclusively dedicated to the, 1 or 2 female Marines that are in headquarters platoon. You got 100 plus male Marines that have to use 2 porta-shitters. Now I already hear the guys saying, "Oh, why can't the males just go?" Guys, there's range regs. You can't have dudes taking shits in woods on ranges that are constantly being used by other people. If every unit that cycles through there is taking shits in the woods, what do you think is going to happen? So just from a sanitary perspective, but those are just small, minute things that nobody even freaking cares to think about. So.
True, Brett, but let me bring this up too as well. So back in 2003, when I got medevaced and I was down at Tulare Air Base, and I had my first shower over like 45 days. And I don't know if you guys had watched the podcast or the video between me and Brett when he interviewed me for war fighters. So my appendix busted in Iraq. I didn't get shot. Nothing happened, but I was jacked up. I spent 5 weeks in a hot unit in Tulare Air Base. And then one day this guy goes like, "Hey, you're in a shower day." And I'm like, okay. So I had these two of the biggest black men I've ever seen in my life pick me up out of my bed, okay, and I had a walker. And they walked me, and I still had an IV in me. We walked over to the shower tent. They took the IV out. I still had the little plug in my arm. And they're like, "Hey, we're gonna give you a shower. You've been here for weeks. You need a shower." And I'm like, "Okay, not a big deal." And I'm like, "I can't shower myself." They're like, "We're going to shower you for you." I'm like, "Okay, I don't care. Two black men going to shower me. I'm good." And then when that happened, when they turned the water on, it was this huge shower tent. When they turned the water on, you could smell the women when they came in, and I'm standing there, and that's my daughter. I'm standing there in my walker, and I'm letting these two black guys, shower me up. And I looked over, and where we were at, they had an entire a detachment of Polish nurses. So they came in. It was their shower time. They didn't know any difference, and they got straight up butt ass naked, and they were in there showering with me. And they're like, "Hey, booby flopping around." I was like, and I'm standing there, I'm a walker. I'm like, "Really? This is the best life ever," you know. So I mean, is women in combat? What I guess where I'm going with this is women in combat. Is that a conversation that we can have right now, and is it something we're going to solve right now? No, but maybe this is something that we need to talk about at nauseum. Do they need to be in the infantry role? No, I don't think so. But I'll say this.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Doc.
No, I mean, your question, why are we even talking about women in combat? Let's pull that back, because what we were saying was, look, we're talking about wokeism and inclusion of
Gotcha.
people with emotional disorders being allowed now into service, all across the spectrum. And when we go back and you say, well, we used the military as a social experiment in the early 1950s for racial integration, and that worked wonderfully, by the way. And it preceded America's acceptance of that very same phenomenon, that integration, right? And so you go, yeah, it was wonderful success. So we do this again in the 1970s with women, right? Not women into combat arms yet. We're not there yet. We're talking women. And we go, okay. And we still haven't figured that out. We still haven't figured out something so fundamental as bathrooms and porta potties, as Brent brings up. We haven't figured out that, let alone haircuts and uniforms and jewelry and makeup and all of these things and pronouns. We haven't figured out any of that. Not since 1970s, for God's sakes. We still haven't figured out the double standard. We just had Rand come out and say, hey, that genderless, ageless PT test that you were going to give failed miserably. So we still haven't figured this out. Now fast forward from the 1950s and the 1970s to 2015, where we said, oh yeah, that thing we never figured out how to do with women, we're going to allow that into combat arms. Oh, it's not working, and they don't want to be there, and they're not successful. Oh, well, Hey, by the way, we're going to let people with emotional disorders now join with high suicide rates and a problem telling, discerning reality. We're going to let them in. Now, how do you think that will turn out? Well, since we haven't figured out the female issue yet since 1970s, let alone the female issue in combat arms, I'm thinking allowing people that need to be that need professional institutional help and have high rates of suicide and depression, I'm thinking maybe this isn't a good idea. That's why we're talking about it, because what can we relate it to? What can we relate it to in the past? And so I want to be clear that we're kicking around this issue of women in the military, and which is a good idea. I advocate for it. I just think it's not been handled in a systematic, programmatic way, because they've always been serving proudly in our military service since 1776, if we're going to be honest about it. And so I think this is wonderful. They should serve. That said, we haven't systematically solved this issue ever. And now we're adding women into combat, which all of our data points, all of our historical data, all of our anecdotal evidence says don't do that. And we ignored all of that. Congress ignored all of that to say, no, we're forcing it because of our sense of justice. And now we're being told, now we're forcing Marxism down your throat too. And so when we want to say, hey, man, how do we think this is going to work? I'm going to say, I think it's going to work very poorly. And I will say, look at our recruiting numbers and our retention numbers. And you start to see, apparently, young men and women agree with us that this has been very, very poorly thought out.
Hey, guys, I'm going to start wrapping this up. We're almost at the 2-hour mark, so I'm going to go round robin. I got Jeff and Chad. I got to bounce, so I'm going to start with them. So let's start with Chad. Take it, brother. Final thoughts.
All right. So I think the woke thing is probably the primary danger, not only in the military, but society as a whole. These grievance theories, be it race, critical race theory, gender theory, queer theory, disability studies, the list goes on. It's all woke BS infiltrating our military, and it's doing it mainly, I believe, through our officer corps. Think about it. Officers go to the biggest woke indoctrination centers in the country, the university. And that's where they pick it up. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think recognizing it for what it is, namely Marxist indoctrination, and calling it out as such is a good start. Second, for my readers out there, 2 books. I already mentioned James Lindsay, Race Marxism. Lindsay has another book called Cynical Theories. He outlines all the different theories, disability studies, queer studies, gender studies, feminist studies, all that grievance crap. He outlines it all in this book. Great read. And last thing I'll leave you with is, of course, fuck Trudeau and let's go Brandon.
Brent, I'll say that thank you for letting me come on to this cast tonight. Everybody here has been phenomenal, and I agree 100% with what everybody has said. I mean, that's a rarity for me. Doc, like I said, you're my new best friend. We need to get together. This is a conversation that I think that we need to have more in depth, and I think that this is the difference. We need to go back into this and talk and do another live stream on this and have another conversation about this, because there's other issues that I think we need to talk about. Do I think that women shouldn't be in the military? No, not at all. Let them do their thing. It's America. Do I think that transgender people should be in the military? No, not at all. It's America. Do your thing. Do I think that gays don't need to be in the military? No, not at all. It's America. Do your thing. Doesn't mean you're any less than me. But there are some issues that we need to discuss, and some things that need to happen. And because the ultimate goal of the United States military is to protect the sovereignty of the United States of America. And what does that mean? I don't know. And that's for a different conversation down the road, and for people that are smarter than me. But I love what we do here. I love America. I love everybody here, and I wish you live your best life, whatever that means. Semper Fi.
I want to thank Jeff for joining us. Of course, I know he's going to bail out of here pretty quick, and I appreciate what he's brought to the stream and a new perspective. And he's obviously a wealth of knowledge. But I wanted to talk a little bit about something that Doc was saying, which was that we still haven't figured out some of these things. And I kind of have to disagree with Doc a little bit that we figured it out. We just don't like the answer that we've received. So we continue to ask the question. My wife likes to do this. She'll ask me something and I'll give her an answer. And then an hour later, I'll get the same question in a slightly different wording. And I'll give her the same answer. And then a day later, I get asked the question again and the same answer. And then another day after that, the question again and the same answer. But then I realize after a while that she's not actually looking for my answer that I'm giving via my free will. She's given me an opportunity to give her the answer that she wants me to give. And that's exactly what I think our government is doing here with these military studies and trying to figure out how to integrate different groups of people into combat operations and make it work. They're not really asking an honest question, open-ended, saying, hey, is it feasible for us to do this and how do we do it? And the answer is no and no. They're going to continue to answer the question until they get the answer that they want, which is yeah and sure. And then the order comes down to just make it happen.
I think one of the things we touched upon tonight, we didn't talk about too much, was patriotism. It's definitely down in the U.S. And I've really noticed it where I'm at right now in Finland. I'm 100 miles from the Russian border. The people around here are very cognizant of what's to the east of them and what it represents. And they're talking about this thing called sisu. And there's not an exact translation of it, but pretty much what it means is the Russians may come, the Russians may kill them, the Russians will not defeat them. And that's something that I think we're lacking in America right now. And I think that's the problem, or part of our recruiting problem.
In somewhere around the mid 5th century, the Visigoths came from the east and they went down into Italy to sack Rome, and they successfully sacked Rome. It is said that rather than defending Rome, that the Roman citizens and the Roman army stood on the side of the road, pointing the way, pointing the direction of Rome to the Visigoth invading force. What this tells us is at some point, the Roman citizens no longer believed Rome was worth defending and welcomed an invading army that would sack Rome. We have to ask, why serve? Why serve in the United States Armed Forces today? Do you really want to defend Marxism? Do our youths really want to defend feminism? Do they want to defend wokeism and atheism? I mean, we have to recognize that, again, if 14% of the United States Armed Forces are female serving proudly, then 86% are male. And as we've already established, more than 99% of the infantry are male. So while we get recruits from a myriad of different corners of the United States of America, we tend to get them from predictable families who have histories, traditions of military service. And those same young men and women are asking rightfully, do I want to defend feminism and Marxism and atheism and wokeism? Is that what I'm here to defend? Because maybe the Visigoths need to march on Washington, D.C. And maybe I need to stand on the road and point my way towards the D.C. Capitol. I started this by trying to compare it to Christianity and why Christianity is failing as a religion and why the others are either holding what they've got or increasing. And it's because they are challenging. They're continuing to challenge their youths. They're challenging them to higher standards and greater discipline and a great cause. Whereas Christianity is saying, let's hold you to a lower standard and be more inclusive and not really push our cause. The United States military is doing the same thing. We have wokeism saying, hey, come with us. If you're from a single parent family and you believe in Marxist ideologies, well, then you belong here. That's going to be real, real hard for the legacy families with military traditions to hear. So if you want to increase recruiting numbers, then you better increase your standard back to what it used to be instead of what it has become today.
All right, guys. This has been a exceptional chat. I appreciated all of the guests coming on tonight and speaking. This is obviously a bigger issue than we can solve. Nor do I have any illusions that anything we've proposed tonight or said tonight is going to be implemented or done. We've talked at length about female integration into combat arms. That's not going to change. We've seen a history of once government enacts something, it's damn near impossible to retract that. And I'll remind people that think that is possible one day. Well, we went through 4 years of a Trump administration with a General Mattis SecDev, and that still was not, reversed. So, female integration into combat arms, that's the new norm. That's going to be around. Now, how prevalent is that? I don't know. That was just an example of a bigger issue with retention and people wanting to join. The heart of the issue tonight was recruiting and numbers and why it's down. That was a small percentage of, or at least topic of contributing factors that we discussed. So my opinion right now is, this is just like post-Vietnam. We're in a slump, and hopefully things turn around. As an Afghanistan veteran myself, I do feel betrayed. But here's at the end of the day, I'm still incredibly proud of my country. I continue to serve in a reserve capacity, and I'm even at the point where I can retire. But because of my love of the country and my love of wanting to continue to serve this great country, I have not seen it to a point yet where I don't want to continue to do so. So until I see that point, I will stay in and continue to serve. So again, guys, it's been a fantastic conversation. I think these conversations need to be had. They definitely need to be discussed because, as Doc already said, the traditional people that are coming into the military aren't, or at least not in the usual numbers that they have. And we need to discuss why is that? Are we pandering to too many specific groups to try to bring in and increase numbers in very small groups of the U.S. military and neglecting the traditional people that are, joining and serving? And if that's the case, then, dude, we got a country to defend. You need to pivot your recruiting advertisements and, efforts back to bringing in those people. Okay. Just because we're increasing one small demographic in the U.S. military doesn't mean we're accomplishing the mission of maintaining a strong force ready to defend this nation when called. So that's my biggest concern. So I do hope that the trends turn around and that we increase our strength and continue to be strong, because I believe we have a big fight ahead of us with our true competitor, and that is the People's Republic of China. And I believe that fight is coming sooner than later. So that is all I have tonight, guys. Again, I appreciate everybody jumping on tonight, and it's been a great stream. Until next time, Semper Fidelis, keep fighting the good fight.